Okay, let's call this meeting to order. January 10th, 2022, Public Safety Commission. Vice Chair Roche, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I had a feeling you were going to ask. Yes, happy to. Excuse me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any adjournment requests? No, wait a second. Roll call.
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner Balbone.
Present.
Commissioner Hallman.
Present.
Commissioner Oliver.
Present.
Commissioner Soon Cheong.
Present.
Vice Chair Roche.
Present.
Chair Berger.
Present.
And just noting Commissioner Roman's absence this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any adjournment requests? Commissioner Balbone?
For firefighter Jonathan Flagler, who died in the line of duty on January 6th, and for 17 people and all of the displaced families at East 181st Street in the Bronx. And then lastly, everyone who's battling on the front lines of COVID to treat people, get them tested, and continue to support us from a healthcare service perspective during this pandemic. We keep thinking that we're near the end, and then we just get another round, and they keep trying to help us. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Oliver, did you have an adjournment request?
I did, and it was for the 17 who perished in the Bronx.
Okay, thank you. Any more adjournment requests? Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
So it was moved by Vice Chair Roche and seconded by Commissioner Hallman.
Quick roll call. Commissioner Balbone.
yes.
Commissioner Hallman.
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver.
Aye.
Commissioner Soon Cheong.
Yes.
Vice Chair Roche.
Yes.
Chair Berger.
Aye. Approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, that was moved by Commissioner Balbone, I believe, and seconded by Vice Chair Roche.
For roll call, Commissioner Balbone.
Aye.
Commissioner Hallman.
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver.
Aye.
Commissioner Soon Cheong.
Okay.
Vice Chair Roche.
Aye.
Commissioner Berger.
Aye. Okay, public comment. I believe we have one. Is that correct, staff? And is he on?
That is correct. Michael Wojciechowicz, are you with us this evening?
Yes, I am. May I start?
Yes, you
Hello?
have 3 minutes. Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Good evening. Okay. Good evening, Commission and staff. Michael Wojciechowicz. With the latest surge in a now 2-year-long pandemic currently upon us, let us start with one simple truth. City of West Hollywood, including its councils, commissions, and advisory boards, LA County, including its many officials like Public Health Director Barbara Ferrer, the Center for Disease Control, along with numerous news outlets, whether immediate, local, or national, have all purposely failed to recognize one simple fact. A person who has chosen to remain unvaccinated but continues taking every other precaution and thus has never been infected with COVID-19 or any of its variants since the start 2 years ago is not to blame for the continued spread of disease. What seemed plausible a year ago only to become a non-deniable fact today. Those vaccinated, no matter the number of shots and/or boosters who have willfully let their guard down, including the wearing of adequate face masks, whether in public or when engaging with those outside of their own specific households, are indeed responsible, if not largely to blame, for the current community spread. Making matters worse, City of West Hollywood and LA County government, including those with celebratory status, whether Fauci at the national level or Ferrer at the county level, have all ignored equal coverage for the protection of certain Americans of lower economic status during the course of this pandemic. Although I have publicly spoken out at multiple levels within this city, including Public Safety Commission, on the matter related to the guidelines and recommendations for owners, managers of multifamily housing, including those populations at increased risk for the complications from COVID-19, never once have I heard anyone within this city, including all 5 council members, city staff, city departments such as housing and rent stabilization, advisory boards, whether representing the disabled or those senior, ever add their voice towards concern for ensuring issued guidelines and recommendations written at the federal level become actually acknowledged and thus implemented into practice. Consider this: the East Side tenement, known as Sierra Bonita Apartments, which actually met the definition of illegal construction by the city's own adopted municipal code when it opened nearly 12 years ago, has enclosed common areas, whether lobby, laundry, community room, and actual closet space modified into a supposed computer area that are all undersized given the occupancy of the building, but also to today go without mechanical ventilation. While this city has given away taxpayer-funded, code-required public parking spaces to those affluent restaurateurs so that their vaccinated, mandated patrons.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have any other public comment? No.
I would ask
Okay.
that if there are any members of the public in the meeting who have not signed up to speak, but who would like to speak, you may use the raise hand feature at this time.
Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Michael, for coming and for your comments. Commissioner comments? No.
I have one, Chair.
Commissioner Holman?
Yes. Sorry, I just knocked over something. So I would just like to present something in regards to our presentations. I think they are all extremely noteworthy. However, I think sometimes they can run long and take up a substantial amount of our time. So I would like to suggest that we maybe put a limit on all of our presentations that are presented to us, giving us as a commission, or allowing us as a commission, the time to discuss.
Okay, Commissioner Holman, do you have a suggested, now this is going to be with the commissioner here, commission, we can decide that. When we do have our presentations that come, would you like to make a recommendation on the time for that, some sort of a limit?
I mean, I think they should be 10 minutes or under. I mean, I think that anyone presenting to us as a commission should be able to present what they would like to share with us in that amount of time.
Okay, so do we have a consensus on that, or does anybody else want to offer another time limit for those? Does anybody oppose that 10-minute limit? Okay, so we have basically a Commissioner Oliver?
Yeah, actually not to oppose, but just wanted to say that like I think we've had some amazing presenters, but I agree that sometimes without giving that time constraint, they just kind of go on at length and that we end up, at 10 o'clock getting down to our business and then needing to push things on. So I'm in favor of that time limit. If it's 10 minutes, if that's what we agree on, it's great.
Vice Chair Roche?
Thank you, Commissioner Oliver and Holman. Great suggestions. I agree. Also, maybe we can factor in maybe like an 8-minute, just so we can leave a 2-minute window for questions from the commissioners. Because I think also we need to acknowledge that we also take up time asking questions that are necessary, right? That's why we have to have a conversation. But I know that we can also extend that time frame as well. So maybe there's a way we can kind of meet in the middle of this.
Okay, any other commissioners want to weigh in on this? Commissioner Balbon.
So the only thing I would say is there may be a time and a place where the topic is meaty enough that it may take longer than 10 minutes. But I think if we adhere to the fact that that's something that requires probably, I don't want to say a vote, but a decision by us to calendar that very purposefully, I think that that'll allow for some of those meatier topics that were referenced by Commissioner Oliver that might have been worthwhile and may take a little bit longer, but let's not make it a habit. Let's make sure that that's the exception versus the rule.
Chair, and I would like to say I agree with Commissioner Balbon. I think we should be very conscious of that. But I think it is something that as a body, we should agree upon before that presentation is presented.
Okay. Vice Chair Roche?
I love that idea. My only concern is that means before the end of each meeting, we need to make sure we know exactly who's presenting and then decide on that time frame before we close. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, your point is well taken. We will limit it to 10 minutes. As the chair, I will use my discretion if we need a little bit of flexibility in there. Thank you for coming up with that recommendation. All presenters should be approved by you all unless it is required by City Council. So, and our agenda items. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Holman. Very good. Unfinished business. Okay, let's move on to the report from the fire department. Chief Smith.
Well, good evening, West Hollywood. And I would just like to say thank you for the support that you've shown the organization through all the years, but especially in this challenging time for us with the loss of our firefighter, Jonathan Flagler, who died combating a structure fire in Palos Verdes. And I've gotten a lot of response from members from West Hollywood, and we thank you for the support. It truly helps us, and we truly enjoy serving the city of West Hollywood. Just on fire business for West Hollywood, December was quite a busy month for us. We had a total of 612 responses, you can see by the activity report. And so that averages for your city of 20 runs a day for your West Hollywood firefighters. So it has increased in volume. And we do, as I've talked the last 3 to 5 months on the uptake of the fires that were within the city. And for December, we had a total of 14. All of them have been relatively benign in nature or small, but that's why you have highly skilled firefighters to keep them small. but there is an uptake in those, which we've addressed my concerns for those small rubbish fires that are contained that lead to larger fires. With that, I'd like to open it up to you if there's any questions giving this new year, 2022, or if anything you'd like to have, or any questions you may have as we go into this new year, or something to close out with last year's, if there's any questions from you, and then I'll leave it to Megan Courier.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay, Megan.
I just wanted to give you guys a quick update that all of our in-person public education programs have been put on hold because of the COVID surge. So we won't be scheduling any CERT classes or any in-person events until we get the go-ahead from the department, but I will keep you guys updated about when that is allowed again.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Do we have any more commissioner questions, comments? Okay, let's move on to 9.
Chair, you have 2 public speakers on this item. The first
Okay.
speaker is Michael Wojciechowicz.
Okay,
followed
go
by
ahead,
Wes
Michael.
Siegler.
Okay, thank you. Michael, go ahead. 3 minutes.
Okay, because your 3-minute counter seems to be going faster than my 3-minute counter, I'm going to forego my comment on this topic, and I'll address it next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. West Siegmiller.
Hi, I actually would like to come during the sheriff's report. Is this the right section?
No, not yet, West. Thank you.
Okay, excuse me.
We'll call on you then. Do we have any more public comments? Anybody want to raise their hand that has not signed up? Okay, let's move on to item 9B, report from the block by block. Shay, are you with us?
And Chair, Shay has been stuck with some travel issues, so has not been able to make it back to Southern California this evening. He did provide the reports, which you see in your packets and also online. If you have any pressing questions, feel free to email me or him or both of us, and we can definitely have a more in-depth discussion next month on both months if necessary.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed that Caesar is here. Caesar, you have a lot of compliments from this commission. If there's anything that you find interesting or kind of unusual, Caesar, let us know. Go ahead if you have anything, Caesar. Okay, let's move on to item 9C, the sheriff's report. Lieutenant Mulder.
I raised my hand, Tori, sorry, you maybe didn't catch it. I do have a question that I'd like, not necessarily for this month, but for next month. Safety escorts. I am wanting to understand, are those escorts specifically around people who need to be escorted to their home, their car safely from whatever establishment they're at, or is that something else? And the reason I'm asking that is we know we've had some issues where we've had people who have not made it home safely. And I'd just like to understand if these are requested safety escorts and the nature of that just going forward, a little bit more definition around what that is. The number's very low, it's 2, but I would like to understand the nature of those escorts.
And Commissioner Balbone, I'll speak with Shay to make sure he's prepared to go more in depth. But just as an FYI, they're not escorting people outside of the city. So it's either safely with a friend to take you home, if, safely to your Uber, safely to your own car if appropriate. So it's within the West Hollywood area, but we'll make sure that Shay covers that next month.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Could I give public comment on this?
Sure, Michael, go ahead. 3 minutes.
Okay, so yes, hi again. Thank you, Tori. I actually had placed a request for public comment on this, and I would wait a month, but I think it's worth noting in tonight's conversation. Now, as much as I've attended public safety, I really should know the extent and scope of block by block, but I don't. But I do know is this: West Hollywood is fairly small, and portions of it, especially on the east side, are only 2 blocks deep, whether you go north or south of the boulevard. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it is also known that West Hollywood has had a problem with vacant properties. And as redevelopment continues, what is happening in my neck of the woods is that houses that are fenced off, scheduled for redevelopment, are being inhabited by squatters. Now, it would be nice that block by block, as they're strolling down Santa Monica Boulevard, could go a block or 2 inwards in either direction to what is known as the redevelopment sites. I mean, the city knows this. The city should be able to share information, because ultimately what's going to happen is what occurred a year or 2 ago at the corner of Gardner and Romaine, where a single family dwelling was allowed to sit for a number of years and it caught fire. And we were fortunate enough in this neighborhood where that fire did not spread, but the city is pushing its luck. And if block by block could just be another set of eyes on top of those of us who are already looking, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any more commissioner comments for block by block or questions?
And Chair, we can either get into it now or under the sheriff report when we speak about budget. We can also talk about this in February, but we are looking for general consensus from the commission regarding recommendations you would like us to make to the city manager, which then get forwarded to the city council for the July 1 budget. And that would include staffing for block by block. And we're not looking for, minutia, but if you would like to see more of something, less of something, yes, it's the good amount, that's what we're looking for from the commission this evening. Or again, we could talk about it February when Shay is present.
I think it might be okay to discuss that a little bit now, and then we can carry it over when Shay's here also. Vice Chair Roche.
Thank you, Chair. I'm having a difficult time recalling. I think it's from the November meeting, but I know that a few of our commissioners made really great points in terms of block by block. And I know that now that we've established the kiosk on the east side, I would love to kind of get an update from Shay on that and how that's working, but maybe Commissioner Holman might have some input or insight as to where we stand with that, and maybe we can kind of direct the conversation that way.
Commissioner Holman?
Yes, thank you, co-chair. I do walk the east side every day, sometimes several times a day. And I have been walking by the corner of Santa Monica and La Brea, where the kiosk is stationed at the Dillon. And it's quiet. Not the same activity that was circling on that corner. I think having that presence has made a significant difference. And what I've noticed over the past few years. So I'm hopeful. I'm hoping that it'll stay the same, if not get better. Because, I always think of businesses that are on that corner, pedestrians that are walking, and individuals that are waiting there at the bus stop to be able to safely wait and board transportation. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on this one. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on that? I do. Commissioner Holman, yeah, it's been up what, that kiosk, a month and a half, something like that?
Maybe a month, and obviously we had the week of very heavy rains, which, I think kind of threw things off schedule. But I believe they start at 11 a.m. because of where the kiosk is housed. That business does not open until 11. However, they are still patrolling the area in the morning.
So, but you do sense that it is seeming to work. We do know that that coupled with some other things worked for the Plummer Park when that kiosk came in. Do you sense that it's working?
No, I really do. I've noticed a huge difference in a short amount of time.
Okay. I know Commissioner Oliver brought this up, the Ramada Kiosk, and several other people. We discussed this last time in November. Do you guys think that there's an interest for that to bring a kiosk up at the Ramada?
I think if I can speak, sure. I think that it would definitely be an appreciated presence to have, block by block kiosk on the west side in Center City, perhaps one that moves. I noticed the one at Plummer Park, it's pretty portable looking. Like it's more of like a stand than a, kiosk per se. So I thought, it might be a good resource to move around the city to kind of put up and down the various major thoroughfares.
Okay, staff, there is some interest in something. I think you said it cost like $800 for a kiosk. And I believe that Shay said that they actually didn't even need additional personnel for that. They could possibly use existing personnel. Is that basically correct?
Yes, and I want to acknowledge David Aguilar. Those of you that have been around West Hollywood a long time, I've got a big smile on my face because it's good to see you, David. Hope you and your family are doing well. He has done such a great job for Block by Block. He's moving up the chain of command here, and he is within Shay's chain of command is the best way I can describe it. So David, thank you for dropping in since Shay is stuck out of town. We appreciate that. But the short answer is, that Shay can move deployment around based on needs within reason, of course. People are hired for certain schedules. And so somebody who might start at 6 p.m. might not want to work at 6 a.m. So there's a little bit of finagling to do behind the scenes as a program manager. But yes, they are flexible with when and where they can deploy.
Does anybody have any questions? If you don't know David, David was with us from way back, and David was excellent. David, as far as being able to defend themselves, we had Shay mention at our last meeting that there seemed to be an uptick in violent nature sort of things. And one of our commissioner asked, can you protect yourself with pepper spray or anything like that? And he was told that's not your policy. And we're just concerned for your safety as well. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, we appreciate it. Of course, the overall safety of every ambassador is priority number one for us. But we don't have any block by block locations that are armed in any way, shape, or form. No bulletproof vests, no batons, no pepper spray. Our ambassadors are trained to remove themselves from any kind of those situations as safely as they possibly can. So that's what we train our ambassadors to do. I'm well aware of some of the folks that we deal with in West Hollywood. Spending all those years that I did there, and that is something that I also trained our staff to do is we've got to do what we can to remove ourselves from those situations, get to a safe zone, and then we can contact law enforcement if we feel we need to. But as far as them being armed, it is against our policy. That's not something that's allowed. We can have the conversation, but it's going to be a tough sell.
Commissioner Oliver?
Thanks. And hey, David, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to see everyone, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah. I think on the note of like armed block by block, obviously, I don't think anybody wants, any block by block ambassador to get hurt. But one of the beautiful things about block by block, as we're talking about reimagining public safety, is that we have these ambassadors who aren't armed, who, can handle situations that don't necessarily require an armed response. And if one is necessary, then they can call in those resources. So I think in terms of remaining that tool in our public safety toolbox, like that's one of the beautiful things about block by block, in my opinion.
Any other questions? David, we, back when you were here, we spoke about trying to coordinate a little bit better with the sheriff's department when a call came in. And Shay has communicated this with us, is if there was a better way to report that, because what's happening is a person has to call you guys, and then they have to call the sheriffs. And a lot of times we were thinking if there could be a creative way to alert the sheriffs somehow. I don't know. At your level now that you're working, is there anything that you guys are working on, or creative ways that you have seen maybe even in other cities where you can share something like that to help speed things up?
Really, it's just public education. So for all of our accounts, I'm coming to you guys recently from downtown LA. So I've been there. I left West Hollywood, went over to downtown LA. So that's where I've been. And, the culture down there is also call us for low-level, non-emergency type situations. But in the event that law enforcement is needed, then they should be call number one. So really, it's just an education piece, educating the public, the community, to make sure that they're comfortable contacting law enforcement first, and then contacting us as a secondary if it is something low level. That's how we're doing things across the country. And that's probably the best way to do it for us. And anytime we take calls, when I was in downtown LA, when I was in West Hollywood, and I'm sure Shay is continuing this there now, if somebody contacts us for a crime in progress or something that requires immediate attention from law enforcement, we can make that call too. So we can definitely call law enforcement, but we should also be encouraging the caller to also make that call. As they were the victim or they're the ones witnessing the crime, the information that we may be able to provide law enforcement may be limited, but that answers your question. For the most part, it's pretty consistent across the country for us though.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Roche.
Thank you so much, David, for saying that, because I actually our commission made a recommendation a few months ago about start implementing a market or educational program for the entire city, so we can kind of empower the business owners and residents, our community members, of exactly how to navigate and work with block by block. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of, I think, misinformation. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because now that reminds me that is something that I would like to consider in this budget conversation. So I know we have kiosk on the floor now regarding the Ramada location, and now circling back to our recommendation to council regarding that marketing program or educational program. I should really preface it as education. How do we run numbers for a program like that in terms of our budget, increasing our budget to factor that in? I'm not sure.
So I can tell you the free things we have done so far since your recommendation. So we have taken Shay on the road show. He's popped into our chamber meetings to speak with businesses, our neighborhood watch meetings with the block captains. Communication staff has done a refresh on all their social posts regarding block by block, when to call. So those are the steps we've taken so far that take a little bit of staff time, but they're very, very easy to accomplish. So as soon as you all made that recommendation, we started that, and we're going to continue to do that. Sheriff has also has a new sergeant at the station and has been, reposting what the city posts about block by block. The website was updated, cleaned up a little bit. So we'll continue all of those free activities to advertise when to call block by block. What we've found, and I'm certainly not a communications expert, is it's really more of a conversation, word of mouth, because it's not super easy sometimes to know, is it this, is it that? And so that's why, we've been trying to go to as many meetings as we can to kind of talk about, let residents ask those questions. What about this situation? What about that situation? And that tends to stick just a little bit better. But our wonderful communication staff will continue advertising it kind of to the broader public as well. And then the businesses are trying to assist us with getting the word out to their patrons.
Another thing that some of us have done on our business cards, when you get your business cards made, if you haven't gotten them made, or if you even want to change them, we write on there, block by block number, the sheriff's local number too. And that might be something we could do, is put a note on there, please contact the sheriff first, and then contact block by block second in certain kind of situations, something like that. I'm just trying to think about how we can get this word out. David, have you seen anything work well in other locations to get that word out?
As Kristen mentioned, a lot of us are doing a lot of meetings. So we've had neighborhood watch meetings. We've had meetings with high-rise properties, apartment complexes, getting together with just senior lead officers in different areas, some of the leadership in law enforcement, getting them to attend meetings for a period there when things were starting to normalize a little bit, if I can even say that right now. We were doing coffee with the cop again, and we were doing that as often as we possibly could. So the partnership with Block by Block and law enforcement, and explaining to folks when to call us, when to contact law enforcement. Some of the business improvement districts that we service, their customers, or our customers, they kind of did the same thing. Mass communication, throwing emails out there, e-blasts, newsletters. A lot of that stuff was publicized or disseminated that way. And it proved to be effective, but I mean, we still get calls first. They still will call us first. So again, it's kind of up to us to also explain to folks like, hey, this is a call that should go to law enforcement before us, and we get them involved if we absolutely need to.
Okay, Commissioner Holman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I also found, as wearing two hats as WeHo East Neighborhood Watch Captain, at our most recent national night out, we gave block by block a table, a booth, so that residents could chat with them, a little more casually, get more information, and understand what they can and cannot do. So I think it's important to have their presence at almost any community events when possible.
It's a great idea.
And I noticed we have Manny, we have some other neighborhood watch captains on here as well. That could be something. We might even be able to do a Zoom call with a couple of us or whatever with your neighborhood watch groups and discuss that. Vice Chair Roche?
My main concern, and it continues to be a concern, is reaching those who are not active in the city, in the community. I mean, I have former roommates who are complete introverts, and it is really hard for them to attend these meetings. Now they're even virtual now. There's really no excuse for folks to not participate and engage with city events, but yet there's still that disconnect. So I almost wonder, would it be beneficial to send out, they send out like mass flyers for a marathon. I'm not for printing out paper, let's just be clear. But I know that when there's a LA marathon or major events that are going to take over. Every single person gets that in their inbox. So I just wonder at some point, how do we reach the folks that aren't showing up? How do we tackle that? And that's all I can think of.
Okay, before I go to you, West, I want to make sure we don't have any other commissioner questions or comments. Okay, West Siegmiller, would you like to speak on this?
Yes, thank you. So this is for the sheriff's report, right?
No, we're not to there yet. Can you hold on a second?
Sure.
Okay, okay, are we ready to move on to the sheriff's report?
Point of
Okay,
clarification, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, point of clarification. So I think staff is looking for us to decide whether we want to expand the budget, keep the budget as is, or wait and push it off till next month. So I think we should, now that we've had a moment to discuss.
Good, good. So we have a couple of, Commissioner Roman missing and we have Shane missing. We had a nice discussion here. Can we just get a consensus for you all? You discussed the kiosk at the Ramada. Are you all in favor of that? Or do you want to discuss that further? Are you in favor for that kiosk? Because we can continue this discussion also next time, but we just want to get a feel for it. Commissioner Balbone?
So Commissioner Oliver made a good point, which is perhaps, we've got the stationary one on the east side, but if there could be some flexibility to rotate and leverage Shay's staff, but have some of these locations where we can either have a designated spot or use something that's a little bit more mobile. And I'd like to understand if that's an option before we say, put it in this definitive spot. I think that's a really good suggestion. And I just don't know the feasibility of that, or if we need Shay for that, or if we need city staff to comment. I'm just not sure. But I liked that idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Balbone. So a couple of things. Let's play what if. So if you recommend to keep the budget the same, but would like some sort of fixed post location, even if that moves around a little bit within reason, you all could do that, but it would pull a patrol from somewhere. Or you could make a recommendation to increase the budget, as council did for the east side location, and add an additional ambassador or two, because people work 40 hours a week, so that wouldn't cover 7 days a week, to have a west side presence. And then obviously the commission could work with Shay to determine what that presence would look like. Is that as clear as mud? Sorry.
That makes sense. Commissioner Holman?
Thank you, Chair. Also, just going back, I'm sorry, Commissioner Balbone, because I had a thought about notifying residents in the community. We do have our new electronic bus shelters. Maybe there's a way we can run a block by block banner info on those, because they're quite amazing. I think they're great. Kudos to whoever came up with the idea. I wish I could take credit for it, but maybe that's an additional tool that we can use in spreading the word.
Good. That's a good idea. Staff, are you getting all of these down? We had the commissioner cards. We had maybe even possibly the block by blocks business cards could even maybe state, try to call the sheriff first. We've had this advertising idea here. We've had the ones where we might be able to meet Zoom calls with the neighborhood watch captains and their people. So that's an important one for us, is to get this out. We've heard this from Shay more than once. Commissioner Balbone?
I love that suggestion from Commissioner Hallman. And, if you think about it, we've got Coast Playhouse, which has the same banner and has had the same banner for I don't know how long, probably 2.5 years now. So the city has a lot of space that we could utilize to put messaging up. And I don't know that it's super costly, but even just flyers to put in the windows of businesses, like some of what we have on the city services, if we could do that for block by block, I think it would be great. So I love that idea. And you have me thinking about some of the vacant space or space that's had stagnant messaging for a really long time that the city has. So that's a fantastic idea. I love that idea.
Okay, staff, can you mark that one down too? And then in our next meeting, let us know how it goes with all of those things. Maybe even email us the progress. Anybody else have any comments on this? Okay, so do we have a basic, I want to make a comment on the possibility of increasing block by blocks staff. We have had an increase we just had a public comment by Michael Wokalewicz tonight about possibly can they help prevent fires or keep their eyes open. We've had scooters. Can they move the scooters? If we did increase block by block and we're able to use them as maybe a mobile kiosk, increase, decrease, something like that, I think personally, it would be worth our money because they aren't that expensive, and we have seen improvement. It appears that we've really seen improvement from Commissioner Hallman. So does anybody else want to speak to that? Do we want to take a consensus vote on anything like that? And how many people would we possibly increase? Vice Chair Roche?
I would love to make a decision on this, but I think Shay needs to be in the room because I would like to increase. And then the question is, how many? Where is the need right now? The need is mid, or is it west, or does it alternate? And what does that look like? Because I love the block by blocks that are on the beat, that are walking the street. I love it. I love that they're on their bikes. I love that they're helping removing barriers such as the electric scooters, etc., for our citizens who are using wheelchairs, etc. So I don't know. There's an element to this that I think is absolutely necessary to increase. It's just a matter of, do we make them stationary or do we increase the ones who are mobile? And I'm not really sure. And I think Shay would give us better insight to that.
Okay, does anybody else want to speak to this? We can continue this at our next meeting as well. We're kind of ahead on purpose like this, so. Okay, nobody, okay, we have Commissioner Roman and Shay, they can watch the video of this and then we can pick this up in our next meeting. Okay, so do we have any more commissioner comments before we move on? Okay, so let's move on to the sheriff's report. And why don't you go ahead, Lieutenant Mulder?
Thank you, Chair Berger. Hello to everybody, Vice Chair and Commissioners. Hope you all had a nice holiday season and a happy new year. For December of 2021, Part 1 crime was up 61% with 176 incidents when compared to last December of 2020 with 109 incidents. And again, for context, March and April of 2020 recorded the lowest Part 1 crimes in the city's history. We usually average before the pandemic 180 to 220 Part 1 crimes per month. And for additional context, at the beginning of 2020, prior to the pandemic, we were almost 30% lower for Part 1 crimes when compared to the same time in the previous 2019. This year to date, Part 1 crimes are up 22% when compared to last year at the same time in December to December. The west side of town was up 158%. Center City was down 11%, and the east side was up 10%. The Part 1 crime breakdown throughout the city, 63% of Part 1 crimes occurred on the west side, 18% occurred city center, and 19% occurred on the east side of town. The West experienced, what drove the numbers on the West side were vehicle burglaries, grand theft from clubs in particular, and the other burglaries and mail theft category kind of drove the numbers for the West side. For the entire city, we did see that burglary and theft crimes really drove numbers this year, condensing all those made up for 151 of the 170 of the 176 incidents. There were specifically 23 other burglaries, those were up, and we had 13 mailroom thefts. Aggravated assault and robberies were also up when compared to last year. Our cops team and our team and policing team, continue to run our weekly operations to address these different crime issues that are occurring in the city. And again, we run, either saturation patrols, we do plainclothes operations, foot beats, and other types of operations to address them. Over the last 3 weeks of December, most of December, we had detectives from our Major Crimes Bureau and our Operation Safe Streets Bureau come out and work with our cops team and entertainment policing team on operations focused on street robberies. So there were arrests that had been made throughout these 3 weeks, and the operation were pretty successful. They were out during the week, as I said, anywhere from 3 to sometimes 5 days a week, and they were running mostly undercover operations with our major crimes. Our deputies from our entertainment policing team and cops team were working in uniform patrol. On Monday, December 27th, deputies Martinez and Olvera from our cops team responded to an emergency call regarding a baby choking. Deputies performed CPR techniques on the baby, which dislodged the object that was in the baby's throat and saved a 1-year-old baby boy. They will both be put up for our life-saving award to the department. So that will conclude my update. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners? Okay, let's go with the Commissioner Balbo.
Thank you for that update, and that is great news about that baby. One of the questions I asked last month, particularly because we're seeing some increases that are fairly high on the west side, the 158% increase, is that mostly tied to our establishments, our drinking, dancing, celebrating establishments? And is it particular venues? Is it outside the venues, after hours? Is that when most of that's happening?
So, Commissioner Balboa, based on times, I don't have specifics for you right now on times, but a lot of the crimes are theft related. There are, if you see in information, the pickpockets, I think there were for December, which the vast majority of those are occurring in the clubs. I think we had about 23 or 24 of those off the top of my head. And then there were some vehicle burglaries in around the area, as well as some other types of grand theft. So so certainly the pickpockets are related. With regard to the other crimes, it's a little more difficult to make that, I think, that connection. But certainly, that's an area where people are in terms of vehicle burglaries, that's an area where people are parking to go to the clubs, to go to the bars, go to restaurants. So certainly that could be considered a connection, but otherwise, I think we can really pinpoint that the pickpocketing obviously is occurring in the establishment, so we can kind of relate that to nightlife.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe we should go to I think we have some public comment on this, because then our commissioners can respond to those public comments as well. Let's go to West Siegmiller. West, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi. I just want to start by saying, I know that, it's not a secret in our little community that often boards and commission appointments are a politicized process, and there's controversy about that as of late. But I just want to take a moment to affirm each and every one of you tonight for the work that you're doing for a community. You all have individual insights that are valuable, and I just want to put that out there for you all. So I'm speaking tonight as someone who is a vocal proponent in our community for medical freedom. And so I often receive messages from West Hollywood residents that are afraid to speak publicly. And so I'm sort of like relaying my own personal experience here, as well as what I've been hearing lately from people regarding the anti-Semitic flyers that were distributed up in the Valley and in Beverly Hills a few weeks ago. I think we can all agree here that that must be denounced. And that group that claimed those flyers, particularly in Beverly Hills and in the Valley, is a very well-known, like crazy fringe kind of lunatic group that does not represent the majority of medical freedom proponents. Nonetheless, the city council used that as, they should denounce that. And I'm glad that they did. But our mayor also went on local news media, and this was reflected in the press release that the city released in response to these incidents, that also conflated medical freedom activism in general with anti-Semitism. And I'm talking particularly about the poster that was, put up in the Fairfax district that made allusions to the Holocaust and relating that to the plight that unvaccinated people are going through. And you may not agree with that comparison. I personally don't think that comparison is appropriate. But as a peace activist for 10 years, I'm very familiar with the conflation of anti-Zionism work with anti-Semitism as an intellectually dishonest argument. And unfortunately, Mayor Meister, she was intellectually dishonest to make that conflation. And it, in my opinion, that irresponsibility rises to the level of malfeasance of office. But my comment here, personally, my mentor and my employer is a Jewish woman. I'm part of a blended family that includes practicing Jews and Israeli nationals. So I am glad that our city council and our sheriff's department please give me 10 seconds. I'm glad that our council and sheriff's department is denouncing anti-Semitism when it's appropriate. And I have total faith that the sheriff's department will pursue, hate crimes when that's appropriate. But will you, Bill Mulder, affirm the right of peaceful activists to have political speech, even if the city council is, mischaracterizing us irresponsibly? Thank you.
Thank you, West. And I hope that everybody has freedom and diversity of thought. That's our strength in West Hollywood. I think we all agree with that. Lieutenant Mulder, maybe you can answer that a little bit later. Let me finish the other public comment. Adam Darvish, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Sorry, a delay there. Good evening, Chair Berger and Vice Chair Roche and Commissioners. Great job and great agenda as usual every time. I wanted to thank Lieutenant Mulder for his leadership and his team. I know I got on, I think, last month, and I mentioned about the need for patrolling. I myself have seen more patrolling on the streets, on my street and different streets, and saw a police car that was giving ticket to someone that ran a stop sign, I think, last night close to my neighborhood. So I was really happy, and I want to thank you, Lieutenant Mulder. I wanted to ask, though, I know Kristen had mentioned last year there was a Safe Smart City, I think was a program that we planned on having cameras at sort of intersections. And I believe there's residential, sort of key areas in residential areas too, but mainly to start with commercial. I know that I was told the first one was installed at La Brea and Santa Monica, I think last year. So I think that could hand in hand with block to block, and our sheriff's station could really help, because every city has those. Beverly Hills has them in residential areas. I know it's costly, but I wanted to know where that is going. And I wanted to ask Lieutenant Mulder about a mobile station, sort of police station that Beverly Hills has. And I know in Cannon Drive, they have a couple of them. They have flashing lights, and they look like a little sort of I don't know what you call them, like a little station. They're just, there's no police officer in them, obviously. There's cameras and flashing lights that I guess captures pictures. If there's a plan for our city to have those, since I know manpower is a challenge, especially in the pandemic. So that's all I just wanted to know. What else is coming? And then one last thing was just the shooting at Burlington Coat Factory, I think it's called. I'll never go to one. But the unfortunate shooting that happened there in the city of LA, I think it was, the teenager that died, that has been in my mind a major concern. What happens if there's a sort of active shooter in our neighborhoods? I don't know myself. I'm sure Lieutenant Mulder, you and your team plan on that, and I think we need to educate our residents how to hide in their own home, and how your team would protect us if there's an active shooter, if you all need to shoot the active shooter, to protect us so the bullets won't go through the walls and kill our residents. So that's all. Just want to thank you really for your leadership and what you do in our city. I know it's a tough job, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, Adam Darvish, for your continued service to this city, not just coming to this commission, but in your other capacities as well. Hang on just a second. Thanks for being patient, Commissioner Soon-Shiong. Let's give Lieutenant Mulder a second to answer those questions by the public. Can you answer those questions, Lieutenant Mulder?
Chair, I believe you have one more speaker, Michael Wojtkiewicz. Michael, are you still with us?
Oh, Michael, are you here?
I am. May I start?
Yes, you have 3 minutes, Michael.
Okay, good evening, Commission, staff, Sheriff's Department, Michael Wojtkiewicz. Given the indifference shown once again towards engagement with the public, thus not only resulting in another meeting where a few residents participate, but possibly lending answer to the prior questions asked during the previous item as to the lack of interaction between this Public Safety Commission and the community at large, especially at a time where certain crimes are rising. This question is made directly to the Sheriff's Department. At some point, possibly in the near future, could you give your opinion of how local news outlets cover issues of crime and greater public safety? Hopefully your professional opinion will evaluate not only immediate news coverage, but follow up in circumstances unsolved. Consider this. 1 month ago, David Pierce, Michael Ansbach, and Brad Osborne were arrested and charged in connection with the deaths of 2 women who were either given drugs while partying at a West Hollywood nightclub or after leaving. Eventually, their lifeless bodies were found dumped outside of separate hospitals. To date, very little news coverage has been offered in terms of finding potential other victims of any of the 3 men, whether together or individually. 3 months ago, October 2021, a woman in her 20s was found shot as she laid within the interior hallway of the upscale Avalon West Hollywood apartment building. Although she made it inside of an actual hospital, she later died there. Again, to date, not only has no suspect ever been identified, no description of suspect has ever been issued or aired. Likewise, no surveillance footage ever released. Even 5 years ago, in January of 2017, Glenn James Anderson, 33 years old, arrested in West Hollywood for allegedly possessing terabytes worth of child pornography and accused of sex acts with a minor. Again, like the 3 men arrested and charged last month, essentially and virtually no news coverage and no attempt at finding other potential victims within the community. Although Mr. Anderson was eventually found guilty of a vast amount of child porn, but also of lewd and lascivious acts with a child 14 or 15 years of age, where he faced more than 30 years in state prison, Mr. Anderson was out in 3 years. And if that isn't bad enough, I challenge anyone at this meeting to find a photo actually published of him on a sex offender registry website. In closing, the pursuit for safer neighborhoods and better public safety overall will always be slow if the Sheriff's Department does not use their influence to demand better news coverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's an interesting one that we haven't had come up before. Lieutenant Mulder, do we have any more public comments? Lieutenant Mulder, would you like to address those public comments first before we move on to our commissioners?
Yes, Chair, I'd be happy to. So first with West's comment, I think his question was, you know, are we going to protect freedom of speech for every group? And yes, we are. That's our mandate in law enforcement. That's what the Constitution provides for, and that's our job to, you know, to give, you know, to protect freedom of speech for people that are exercising their First Amendment right. And then Adam's questions regarding first the cameras, and specifically the camera that Beverly Hills has. Some time ago, Commissioner Balbone had talked about the same cameras and asked us to look into those, and we did. They're pretty expensive. I think they're over $100,000 each. They're a great setup, but certainly a bit quite expensive for that particular kind of camera. I know that the city does have their camera program that they're still looking at. We've had discussions recently with the city about it about a month or two ago, but certainly that got derailed a little bit because of COVID and finances and all that. But I know the city is still looking at doing something to that effect. With regard to having cameras in various parts of the city, or to enhance that. Also, Adam had talked about the night in terms of an active shooter issue, and maybe what the public, how they should react during that. The Sheriff's Department some years back made a video about active shooters and giving information to the public what they should do. Matter of fact, the video won an Emmy Award. If you go to a search browser and put in the LASD active shooter video, it should come up. It's also on the LASD.org website. And so you can view that anytime. We also at the station, and every station, train with regard to active shooter situations. We have done additional training, our teams with local restaurants, bars, clubs, certainly an area we've identified that could be an area that could happen. And so we've done training with personnel at those establishments and we've actually run through an active shooter scenario with them. And we will continue to do those. Obviously, COVID has a bit derailed that kind of training. And I think that was all of Adam's questions. And then the last gentleman was talking about certain interactions with the media and using the media as a partner to help solve crime. And we do that. The one case he referenced with the two women who I think were initially at some point in the evening at a establishment in West Hollywood, but it was some hours later that the incident then occurred. It was an LAPD handle in LAPD's area, so they conducted the investigation on that case. And then with regard to the Avalon, the homicide that occurred there, we did identify and arrest an individual for that crime. And And then the third case you referenced, I'm unaware of that case. I don't know if that happened in West Hollywood or that person was arrested in West Hollywood. I'm unaware of that case. I think that covers all the questions, unless I missed something, Chair.
Okay, I don't think you did, miss any. Commissioner Soon-Shiong, thank you for being so patient. Go ahead.
Hi, Chair Berger. I just want to clarify that now would be the appropriate time to ask questions about the staffing and budget proposal that we received in our packets.
Okay.
So I have a series of questions, and I'm not sure if it would be helpful for me to share my screen to reference the specific numbers I have questions about. But in general, on page 4, we see the number of personnel going down, but the cost of personnel consistently going up. So notably in 26.
Would you like to share your screen? So,
Commissioner, actually, Commissioner Soon-Shiong, if you're ready to go, I can make you a co-host and you can share.
Sure.
Or I could pull it up.
I'm ready to share.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Tori, I just need a minute to give her permission. There we go.
So in this on page 4, we see the number of personnel going down, but the cost for personnel going up. So I want to flag that in 2016, if we look just at the gray box, 14.2 million paid for 63 officers, but in 2022, 20.4 million will pay for 60 officers. And then another example is that in 2007, 10.3 million paid for 67 officers. But again, in 2021, 20.2 million, almost double that, will pay for 60. So my first question is around, the description of this rising cost. I had another question about the description of these categories. So in particular, my understanding is that the security ambassadors and security guards are actually a part of the block by block contract. The numbers are quite similar from the block by block budget/staffing proposal we received. They're a little bit off actually, but I'd love to understand, what that covers and, is block by block a subcontractee of the Sheriff's Department? I also-
So let me take a couple of these as we go. So to your first point, with regard, think it's more expensive just across the board. So a deputy sheriff, their price is set by the LA County Auditor Controller's Office. And it's the simple point that a deputy sheriff, and I think that's the point you're trying to make, is much more expensive today, than they were years ago. With regard to private security, we also have private security contracts with PacWest Security Services. Right. And PacWest and Block by Block are independent of the sheriff. They are their own companies. And the city has contracts with each of those companies separate and apart from the sheriff. They're not supervised by the sheriff, they're supervised by the city.
So these numbers are actually separate, LASD, security ambassadors, and security guards in that case. So this line item, actual expenditures.
Yes, they're separate. And Christine Seyfried, our budget officer, put this together for the November 15th council discussion. So she's definitely a little more savvy than I am about her spreadsheet, but private security is separate from sheriff costs. I believe she was just trying to show kind of like the broader public safety cost that includes the non-sworn contracts.
Okay, so yeah, that potentially answers my question, which is whether or not these security ambassadors actually are counted or are an expenditure of the LASD contract. I'd also love to have explained the other sheriff costs budget item, which in actual expenditures is the third. And then my last set of questions, and I have more, but I can pause here, is if we look at the actuals versus expenditures, we can see that actually last year overall, there was there's less spent than budgeted for. And for example, if we look at some of the line items for sheriff personnel, there was underspending by around $115,000. Yet in 2022, there's actually going to be more budgeted for sheriff personnel, around $300,000 for the same number of sworn officers. And I recognize that this is partially due to the fact that the staffing costs are set by the county, but I'd love to have some of those numbers explained. I take your point that some of the doubling of the, for example, security guards, security ambassadors might not be relevant to this contract, but the numbers might be here. But to the extent that it's possible to explain, I'd love that to be shared publicly. And then my last question, sorry for all of the questions, is whether or not it would be possible to share these budget numbers and this file as an Excel. I found it quite difficult to review it as a PDF. And that's just an overall question.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will check, I'm writing a note, I'll check with finance to see if they can share it in Excel form. And as to why the county auditor controller can increase costs specifically over the years, I would have to, besides just things becoming more expensive, they set a COLA. There are liability issues at times, training, vehicles more expensive, things just get more expensive over time. But the CAO's office sets the rate, gives the sheriff's department contract law that rate, and then each city decides what to contract for. But the rate is non-negotiable, if that makes sense, if you choose to be a contract city with the county. With regard to block by block and Pac West, I do anticipate their base costs going up so they can match our newly passed living wage ordinance that the council passed a couple months ago. Hotel workers came into effect in this month, January, and every other city contract has to be in compliance with that new hourly rate on July 1st. And did I miss any other of your questions? I will say we also have added extra patrols, which are billed separately. At times we've hired arson explosives to be in the city when we've had high profile events, Halloween, Pride Parade, some of those costs are in there as well. In addition, the sheriff's budget, and I'm actually working with the budget officer to separate some of this out next time. I'm not sure if we'll be successful for July 1, but it also includes all the fire department costs for major events, the medical tents, the ambulance company. Those costs are kind of blended in with the sheriff's department. As on the police, it's called Police Protective Services on our budget, if you look on our website, which is why I also included the 575 in your packet, so you can see the actual numbers of staff and what their billing rates are. So it's not blended in with some of those other things.
And staff, it seemed to me that those numbers, I know they included peripheral other personnel, but is that a third party or something that determines the insurance and those things? Because I think Commissioner Soon-Shiong brings up a good point. I mean, you have the sheriff's department, if they had like a monopoly on this, they can just charge us whatever they want almost. I mean, that's something that jumped out in my mind.
It's up to the auditor controller, not the sheriff's department. And I'm not making a value statement, just more of a factual of how it happens from the county. It's the rate is set by the county auditor controller's office, which is independent of the sheriff's department. Certainly for the liability charge, which is very high right now at 11%, that is set by running the actuarials and kind of based on incidents. So obviously what happens with deputies in the field affects that liability trust fund rate.
Okay, thank you.
And that's also different than the price of the deputy, if that makes sense. That's in addition to, you pay that 11% on top of your contract. I've had years where it's been as low as 6, and even a couple of years where they didn't charge the rate at all. And as you see, we're at 11 right now.
Okay, thank you. And also, Commissioner Soon-Shiong, I agree. I would love to see those documents instead of a PDF, Excel spreadsheet. Can you try to see if you can get that to happen, staff?
Yes, I will ask her. I don't know if it's possible, but I will ask her.
And there's also some spreadsheets that are online, data sheets that are from the law enforcement department. I've got a big list of those that I can try to share to you guys too, if you haven't seen those already. I really like to see spreadsheets as well. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Soon-Shiong. Do you have any more follow-ups with that?
There's one question around what is included in the other sheriff costs budget line item.
And again, I will double check with Christine so I can get and I might even see if she can attend our next meeting actually. But the other costs that we have for the department include special operations, if we do any overtime, special events, when we hire the medical tent, it includes extra fire staffing. Even this past Halloween, we didn't have an official Halloween, we had extra fire staffing. You know, all of that's kind of lumped into that overall police protective services line. And we are, the MET team, you know, we are looking, the clinician of the MET team, the civilian clinician, at trying to separate some of that stuff out. So when you pull up the city's budget, it's very clearly sworn resources, and then anything else public safety would be separate.
Yeah, and I think dispatch and some other ones were included in that grouping.
We don't directly pay for dispatch, just as an aside, or like our detectives in the station, we don't pay directly for our station captain. In theory, when the auditor controller sets those rates, you know, the price for a lieutenant, sergeant, deputy, it includes some of that overhead, you know, toilet paper for the station, electricity, a station commander, which would be Captain Ramirez, you know, they build all of that into the price. So for tonight, I mean, yes, you know, we can look at it from, you know, why does the county set the rates they set? Why has the increase been so big? But what I'm really looking for all of you tonight is, how do you feel about our 575, the staffing that we have at our station, and the level of that staffing?
That makes sense.
And then we can also, you know, I can also follow up for you on the other questions as well.
And then we can worry about the costs if we decide what we want first. Okay, Vice Chair Roche, I think you were next. Was it Commissioner Balbon?
Thank you. I just had a question in reviewing attachment B and attachment C. Attachment B says we have 64 sworn officers, right? But then you go to attachment C and we're trying to compare our cost per sworn officer between West Hollywood and the other cities that are not contract cities. And it says that we have 99 sworn employees. And I'm just trying to, in the bottom, when you actually do the estimated cost per sworn officer, it's 99, not 64. So I'm just trying to understand the difference between those.
There are officers we directly pay for, and that is the 60. And then the total people in the building is about 100. Excuse me, 100.
Okay. But so
And
is that last line wrong because it says sworn officers?
No, they're sworn.
That's where I'm just trying.
So Captain Ramirez is sworn, but we do not directly pay for him. So he is part of the total, but not part of the 60 that we pay for example.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to acknowledge that Councilmember Erickson is on here. Thank you for coming. Commissioner, Vice Chair Roche, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Just really quick, great questions, everyone. Thank you so much please don't apologize for asking questions. I encourage it. There's never enough questions. This is a very heavy item. So I want to make sure that everyone understands. My question had to go back to the original, the graph that Commissioner Soon-Shiong was showing, displaying just a little while ago, and now I can't even find it. But it goes back
It's
to
attachment B.
thank you. Thank you. I found it. It has to go, it's going back to the events, shares, fire, medical line under actual expenditures. What's interesting is in fiscal year 20, it shows what? $1 million, $1.1 million. And that confuses me, being that we were in a pandemic.
We can't, I can't hear you, Vice Chair O'Shea. You just cut out.
Oh, no.
There you are. I got you. Go ahead, we can hear you.
My internet just had enough. So my question goes back to that line item regarding special events. It looks like for fiscal year 2020 that we budgeted, or actual expenditures were for like $1.1 million. I don't know. And I'm just wondering how that is, being that we didn't have any major events for that year due to the pandemic.
So fiscal year 20 is calendar year July 1, 2019.
Okay, got it.
Through June 30th, 2020. We like to make it confusing for everybody.
Yeah, beautiful. Appreciate that.
That money was for Halloween 2019 for the most part, and some smaller things that fall. But the bulk of that was Halloween 2019.
Got it. Beautiful. Okay, so then 21, we have about 369,000. Okay, so that dropped dramatically. Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yes, and Chair, I'm going to sneak in Councilmember Erickson. He was attempting to speak during public comment on Sheriff. Councilmember, if you're still with us.
Oh, you didn't.
Thank you.
I could have waited. I didn't need to sit here.
Sorry, I wasn't sure how long we would have you.
This is a really important meeting, and I just, I don't even know what month it is. Apparently it's January, but I just wanted to stop by. I stopped by the Women's Advisory Board and your members, Joint Public Safety Commission, to really thank you all for the serious work that you're doing in our communities to keep us safe, healthy, and all the real accountability, transparency, and all the input from the community that you're taking. It's really critical. And this is a moment where we're seeing everyone really wanting to make sure that they're safe in their homes and in their businesses and their communities. And I know that this isn't an easy conversation. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be a difficult conversation, and the amount of hours and time and everything that you put in is greatly appreciated by myself. I would never speak on behalf of my colleagues. I'm sure I could probably say nicely that they all appreciate it as well. I don't know, that Commissioner Hallman, he's a little trickster, so I don't know about him. But nevertheless, I just wanted to personally thank you all for all of the work that you do. I read all of your reports. I read all of the stuff that you do, and you're really setting us up for the future. So I just really wanted to come on here and just convey my gratitude to each of you for pushing the city in the right direction and forward and all that you're doing. So thank you. Get vaccinated, get boosted, wash your hands, wear a mask, stay healthy. I'll be lurking in the background, and that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. And thanks to our staff too, Kristen and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Erickson. Commissioner Oliver.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Erickson, as well. So I just wanted, I'm looking, the question is, how do we feel about the 575 for next year? And in looking at the comparison of what West Hollywood spends attachment C, West Hollywood versus Beverly Hills, Manhattan Beach, Culver City, Santa Monica, and others, clearly we are, in terms of cost per sworn employee, the cost of this contract is lower. But I think, overall in the conversation that I'm having in the community, something needs to change. There's an overall sense of from the conversations I'm having that people aren't feeling safe. And I I'm looking at this and I know that the budget that we're looking at for the sheriff's department is, part of the overall public safety budget that, we're going to be allocating resources not only to block by block and mental health. And then we also have some new, there's a universal basic income and Project Room Key were just approved by council study and to move forward. So this isn't the only public safety discussion, but I do want to say that I think we need to be talking the substance in addition to the dollar amount, which a question I've heard a lot is, why don't we have foot patrols? Why don't we have, the proactive community policing? And I think that needs to be part of this discussion, because I don't want to get back into the commission, after this budget is passed and this contract is passed, excuse me, and still hear that we don't have the resources for that. I want that to be part of the discussion now, so that, residents, visitors, businesses have that sense of safety, have that sense of a relationship with our sheriff's department. And then also, I think we have to be looking at this not as a just lowest cost, but also, what are we getting in our people feeling safe? Because ultimately that's what this is about, is for people to feel safe.
Okay, so I think we all have, we discussed a lot of this before, so I'm not going to put words into our mouths about increased foot patrol. We discussed previously about our own sheriffs instead, and those things were going to be looked into, investigated further by staff. So that's kind of that's in the works right now about that. I think the key now that we probably want to discuss is, wherever we get the sheriffs and the law enforcement, how many do we want, basically, and what do we want? Where do we want to allocate? Do we believe that that's the way to go? Do we want 67? Do we want 60? Do we want more foot beats? Do we want more? I think if we start there, then we can start to determine more about, the right tool for the right job, and that kind of thing. So I just want to put that out there as well. You guys can discuss how you want to, but I believe that Commissioner Hallman was next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In chorus with what Commissioner Oliver just stated, I had dinner with a friend last night, a resident that lives on Hayworth. And he said to me that, and he's an owner, he owns his unit, that one of his neighbors said sadly they felt it was time to leave West Hollywood because they didn't feel it was as safe as it once was. So I really think we need to be mindful and focused on this budget and our recommendation to council and how money should be allocated, as you just mentioned, Chair, because, we get reports, we look at reports, the numbers go up, they go down, depending on the month. However, there are serious quality of life issues that residents suffer with that I think we really need to concern ourselves with as the city's Public Safety Commission.
Okay. I'm not sure who is next. I'm going to go with Commissioner Soon Chiang.
Thank you. Yeah, following up on Commissioner Oliver's point, I want to have us all return to the presentation that Yvette Ale from Dignity Empowering Now made, which highlighted a survey from a community safety survey from the neighborhood and from various neighborhoods, which showed that between 2013 and 2018, the percentage of residents that felt very safe went from 43% to 26%. So it's absolutely true that people are feeling less safe. At the same time, if we looked at the graph that I just showed, the investment in law enforcement in the sheriff's department is going up. And so that's exactly the right question. What are we getting for this money, and is it helping people feel more safe? And so we can look at the instrument itself, and then also within that contract, even more money is getting fewer officers because of the exponential rise in the salary of each officer. And so those are two, I think, important things to keep in mind as we consider, where our money is going and how we define public safety in this commission.
Okay, staff, I wanted to ask a quick question. I think that we reduced PAC West and block by 25%, was it, in July? Did that ever come back, or is that still reduced?
July of 2020, 20% cuts were made to block by block and PAC West. They were not restored. Although block by block did add the East Side Kiosk this past November. Then on the sheriff's side, it was a 15% cut. Part of that was the elimination of Halloween, and the other part and Pride of 2021. And then it also included the elimination of 2 deputies and a sergeant to take us from 63 to 60.
Did you say that we had a new sergeant that just came on?
It's not, it filled the hole. It's not in addition to. So we're still at 60.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Soon-Shiong, for that. Commissioner Balbon.
So one of the things that I was very interested in is attachment C and looking at some of these other cities. And I wanted to take some of our statistics for our crime and what we see with block by block and the interventions we see included in this budget, and compare them to what we might see in the crime reporting of the other cities. And the fascinating thing was I could find 0 information. And at least when I went through Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, and I did Culver City, I had a little bit of a more difficult time navigating their site. I didn't see a commission like this commission, number one. And number two, I most definitely did not see consistent reporting of
Commissioner Balbon, you froze. Are you there still? Commissioner Balbon? Okay, Commissioner Balbon, I hope you can still hear us. In fact, I'm not going to make a comment on this. I want to say something about that in a second, but I want to make sure you're back on with us. Let's go on to Vice Chair Roche in the meantime, while we're waiting for Commissioner Balbon to come back in.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to say it. I know we have limited funds in terms of, we've made cuts due to the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic. It's still part of our lives. And I really would love to see this commission continue to focus on investing in alternatives. I still would love to see this commission support avenues like, what is it? The mobile crisis response team, right? I know these are alternatives that our city is coming up with, and I think it's important that we continue to keep pushing those alternative services forward, because again, we've looked at the historical data. More police doesn't always mean a decrease in crime or increase in safety. One doesn't necessarily directly lead to the other. I can understand, though, how some folks do feel safer with more police on the streets. And I believe it is a very situational thing as well. There's serious crimes that are occurring. I want those police officers focus on those crimes. But we also have a homeless epidemic in our city. We have a mental crisis all over Los Angeles County. So how do we focus? How do we like take stuff off their plate so they can be more effective at what they need to do, dealing with these part one crimes and more serious crimes? And how do we also make sure that like when people go to report, they're not deterred from reporting? You know, that's a huge problem still within our police department. So I continue to hear this over and over again, that people are deterred from reporting. And guess what? It's because folks are not invested in the city. They are coming from wherever, these rotating deputies. And unfortunately, they're not all Lieutenant Mulders. I wish they were all Lieutenant Mulders, but they're not. And it's just a little challenging. So I would like us to continue to consider alternatives to creating solutions around this issue around public safety. That's all. I'm just going to keep it in the forefront. I know we were really passionate about it in 2020, and I just don't want us to forget that is still a real there's still a real opportunity for us to still move that direction.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Roche. Let's jump back over to Commissioner Balbone. Commissioner Balbone, we lost you there.
My apologies. I don't know where I left off, but basically, keep it short. I was trying to compare our crime stats to some of these other cities to understand, are we making progress? Is it out?
Oh, you froze up again, Commissioner Balbone. I'm not sure if you can still hear us, but I do have something. I'll read to you guys quickly. I have a friend that's they're called the from Beverly Hills, the Safety and Health Commission or something like that. And I asked her what they are doing just a little bit ago, I'd say a week or two ago. And she says in Beverly Hills, she's the chair of that commission. She says in Beverly Hills, they are taking measures to strengthen their crime prevention modalities. In our city, we are about to introduce drones. We have 2,000 cameras installed around the city. Many of our storefronts on Rodeo Drive have installed bulletproof glass. We have hired more police as well as private security, and the retail security guards are now inside and outside, and some are armed. And she said that a lot of the problem is the Prop 47, Prop 57, and AB 109, those policies that were passed that, and I guess the something about the bail. So I'm not sure if you can hear that, Commissioner Balbone. I can ask her again what the latest, if there's something more direct that you commissioners want from them. Commissioner Balbone, did that kind of answer what you were talking about?
Well, it answers the amount of prevention that I think Beverly Hills is trying to enact, and the investment they're making in a lot of protection. But what it doesn't answer is, are they making progress? Like, what are they seeing? What are their crime rates? What is the quality of life that their residents are experiencing? Because it seems like that's not readily available or talked about. I don't see a commission like this one that has minutes. I did go through their city council minutes, and I didn't see a lot of references to some of what we focus on here. So that's one of the questions that I do have is there a way to get at some of the stats from these other cities? That might be helpful. I like to look at data, and when we talk about what we're purchasing, I'd at least like to understand what their crime information looks like.
Okay, if you could email me, and I'll put you on the email too, and we can ask those questions to her, and then we'll get it out to all you guys. And any people from the public that are on here that are interested too, contact our liaison, Kristen Cook, so that you guys can stay abreast with the answers that we get. Do we have any more commissioner comments?
I did have one thing, and I apologize, my internet keeps going out. I don't know what's going on, but one of the things we've talked about is issues with transparency and sometimes requests that are unmet from the sheriff's department. Not specifically the West Hollywood assigned sheriffs, but the sheriff's department. I would like to continue to see where we have requested information, status of that, and where we haven't received what we've requested. Because that's something that I hear a lot about. And I do know that at times, both Lieutenant Mulder and Captain Ramirez have done their best to get us information in whatever fashion is accepted, even if it's not exactly what we've requested. But that's something that I would like to understand more about, because when we're paying for a service and don't get some of the things that we've asked for, what's left unresolved? And I don't know that we see that a lot. So I would like to see more of that information available.
And just
Okay.
to help me out, if you could kind of lay out whether it's email or when they happen, when that happens. So, we can identify, okay, we asked this, we didn't get this. We asked this, this was the answer, whatever it is. Because in generalities, it's hard for us to do anything about it. Same for people who are being deterred from making reports. You've got to tell me and Bill. I can't beg you all enough. If you hear that out there, you've got to, kind of tell us it was January 1st. It was Kristen Cook. She called and said X and the deputy said Y. Because otherwise we're never going to be able to kind of put our fingers on the problem with that.
And I want to just clarify, Kristen, my comments are specifically around formal requests coming from the city that have been unanswered. Not necessarily anything we've talked about here, because I do think that we get good follow-up. I'm speaking specifically of requests from the city, whether it's the city manager, yourself, or someone else, or even our legal counsel in the city, that we do not receive a response from, because that gets talked about and it's real, but I don't have a tracking mechanism for it to understand how many times does it happen? Are those things still left unresolved? Have we come to some type of agreement? And I would like to understand that.
So the more specific we can be whenever we find those, we'll even make a list and put it in a table and say, okay, this is what was requested and this is the answer or not. Because I agree with Kristen, we want exactly specifics about what those exactly are so that we know. Commissioner Oliver?
Yes, I do want to echo what Commissioner Balbone, said regarding transparency and regarding, when the city requests an audit, it's a little different, especially after, what's happened. And again, to echo Commissioner Balbone, there's a difference in criticism between the West Hollywood Sheriff's Department and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department overall, and the sheriff himself. I think there is, in order for the sheriff to be in order for people to feel safe, that trust has to be there. And what I'm hearing from commissioners tonight, and from community members, is that there is a bit of trust that's missing in this equation. I would like to see that audit that, I don't remember exactly. Last year, I think it was requested, but I would like to see that. But I also think that it's important to, recognize that there are two conversations here. Like there's a conversation about, kind of cameras and bulletproof glass and things like that. But those aren't solutions. We can put a Band-Aid and just try to fill the streets with armed officers and put 2,000 cameras and try to be a walled off city. But that's not solving, the overall public safety issues of our time and of our city. And frankly, I don't want, I think that there's a time and a place there absolutely is a time and a place for an armed officer. There's a time and a place for a security camera, but I don't want to live in a city where we're not solving, the underlying issues, and just, focusing on trying to fund ways to separate us and to not have to face those issues.
That's a good point. Vice Chair Roche.
Thank you, Chair. I just really briefly, Kristen, to your point about regarding discouraging reporting, could you talk me through an example? So let's say X was discouraged, and then X informed another person, which informed me. What would be the next steps? I think it's good for the entire commission to hear this.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought it up, Vice Chair Roche. So ideally, the person themselves who was discouraged would start with Lieutenant Mulder.
Okay.
Because first of all, it may be a conversation where there wasn't a crime and it's trying to explain what's criminal, what's not, right? Let's say best case scenario. Worst case scenario, deputy is genuinely discouraging the person from making a report. Bill, as our service area lieutenant, can follow up with that deputy specifically and handle that. Anybody who has an issue at any time, I know Lieutenant Mulder is still with us, so he could jump in if he wants to. If they have an issue with any deputy, they can speak to the watch commander, whether that's the watch sergeant or the sergeant in the field, if you're speaking to a deputy out there. And then obviously we have Lieutenant Mulder as a resource as well. Bill, is there anything you wanted to add? But it's kind of like if,
but before Bill jumps in,
Kristen is out there saying, oh, I'm not going to do that for you. The supervisors at the station need to know that. So the supervisors can handle that, because that's a personnel issue at that point.
Right. So let's say the situation was an assault and the person is experiencing trauma. Are they then supposed to get the officer or deputy's name and badge number while experiencing in the process of their trauma? I guess that's my point, is I don't know how to get, they're not recording and taking that information in that moment. So
right.
It's right. That's the disconnect, right? Because if we had all that information, I would be able to then circle back and provide that to Lieutenant Mulder.
But even with a day and relative time, and I'm going to let Bill jump in here too.
We can figure out who's on staff.
Electronic tracking that goes on. Lieutenant Mulder can kind of get to the bottom of who actually responded and who was there. But Bill, did you want to jump in?
Yes, absolutely, Kristen. So first of all, like if somebody is calling into the station and they're maybe not getting the answers or the service they want, or if they've called deputies out to a scene incident and they aren't getting the answers they want there, they feel a report should be taken and they're not taking a report, the best thing that they can do then, I tell people this all the time, is to either contact, if somebody's calling in, maybe ask to talk to the watch sergeant or watch commander to say, hey, talk to them about it. Say, I'm calling in with this issue. I think I really should have this service and I'm not getting that. Or if they're at home or wherever they're at and they call deputies out, they're not getting the service they want, we have a field sergeant that they can request and talk to them. They can call the station, ask to talk to the watch sergeant or watch commander, who's usually a lieutenant, say, hey, this is what's happening and I think I should get a report or it should be kind of handled like this. They can ask them to intervene, or like Kristen said too, you can always then, if the event has happened and is over, and now you're hearing about this secondhand or however you describe, then you can contact me and then I can look into it. But the most important thing is that we want to make sure people get the service they deserve to get, and that we can take care of those reporting and all those different issues as soon as possible when it happens. So I always encourage people, if you're not hearing what you think you should be hearing, you're not getting the service you should be getting, then ask to talk to a supervisor, a watch sergeant, watch commander, and then, or after the fact, they can email or text or call me. But that's how it should go. Now, if it's already happened and there's some time between that event and now, then yeah, we can always look into it to see what happened during the situation. And if, we drop the ball, then we can fix the situation. And then of course, if it can be a complaint, and then there's a personnel investigation that's a result of that as well. And if we have to, either retrain people, or if there are, some sort of sanctions for not doing what they are supposed to do, that's also can be part of that as well. So there's kind of multiple different kind of avenues and layers to this. But the most important thing, we'll make sure that people get the proper service they deserve.
And let me say just one quick thing. One of the main functions of this Public Safety Commission, and it's stated very clearly in our purview, is we are the main liaison between the public and the sheriff. So they can come to us and tell us if they don't trust the sheriff's department and anybody in the sheriff's department. That's part of our job. That's one of our main functions as the body, is to make sure that they feel safe, and they can come to us if they have a problem with the sheriffs. And that might be something that we need to make everybody aware of in the public, while we make everybody aware of the block by block, how that works, the importance of the Public Safety Commission, and that they can talk with us. Commissioner Oliver.
Yes, and thank you, Lieutenant Mulder. I wanted to ask, regarding the reporting, because this is something that it's not a one-off. Like, this is something that I've heard over and over and over, and from different areas of, different people in the community, unrelated, people in the community. How can we change that? Like, what's the current, training, or what's the mood in the department, or in the station, I should say? Like, why does it seem, at least anecdotally, to be a trend, and how do we turn that around so that instead of having to go through the process of complaining, after the fact? Like, I was so impressed years ago when I was working, in another city that didn't have the resources to respond as quickly. And then in West Hollywood, a neighbor's car was broken into, and he woke up in the morning to a police report, or at least it was like the unfinished one, like tucked under his windshield wiper. Like that, I was like blown away by that level of service. And, that's here in West Hollywood. Why the trend away from that, at least, as I said, anecdotally?
So generally speaking, obviously training, Ed leads by example. He holds his deputies to a high standard. But I'll be very honest, it's very hard to fix something without the what. It's fine to tell a room of 20 deputies, okay, better customer service. But if we can pinpoint things, it might be a training issue. It might be the wrong fit for our city issue. I'll give you an example. Beginning of the pandemic, city manager at the time was getting some complaints about staff not returning phone calls while we were remote. And we're all looking, he's like, return your phone calls. It's like, well, I call my constituents back. Are you calling your constituents back? And we couldn't figure it out. Long story short, it was going to an extension where nobody was there. Like, it was a position that was empty. And so again, he can tell us, call our people back. If we think we are calling our people back, there's nothing really to improve on it. So you can pinpoint what exactly is the issue. Is there a common theme? Is it the same person over and over and over again? Or is it a training issue, something lacking more generally across the deputies? More information helps Bill and Ed raise the bar.
I think it's specifically the reporting. And I will be, I try to, it's hard to convince some people, to show up to the commission. I try to say, come and they need to hear, the sheriff's department needs to hear from you. But I will take it on my own to come to you and the lieutenant and Captain Ramirez. But I do think, specifically that the reports, as in terms of when it comes to building public trust and confidence, that's an important thing. And that's mainly what I'm hearing is that.
Absolutely. And I know Bill can jump in here, but the specifics help them get better.
Sure, absolutely.
Because if you say to Bill's team, community impact team, make sure you take reports, they're going to look at each other like, well, that's what we do. We take reports, but you can say, Deputy Kristen, on this day, you spoke with Robert Oliver and he had a concern about this. And you could be like, oh my gosh, this is what happened. This was my perception, whatever it is. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but Bill, do you want to jump in a little bit, just kind of on how you guys handle it station wide? But again, I'm a big advocate for specific information.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Kristen. That's the really only way we can address it with specific incidents, because it might be the same employee over and over again, or if it's more of a congregational issue, then we can address it. But I think maybe one thing we can maybe get better at is kind of explaining what that means, report. So, and when we go to every call, we go to every contact we have with the public, we on the computer, there's an event assigned to that. Whether it's a call or if I conduct a traffic stop, I can create an event in my computer to address this particular traffic stop. And then we clear every call out with like a narrative about what happened. And so really every time we contact somebody, there's a report taken of that contact or that situation. Now, not every time a criminal report's being written. And so oftentimes, if the situation or incident doesn't fulfill the elements of a particular crime, then we can't just write a crime report just because. Sometimes we'll take a suspicious circumstances report depending on the type of situation. So that might be the issue. We have to be better explainers about what we're doing. Every situation, there's a reporting of it, and there's we take information and it's memorialized. However, not every situation gets a criminal report. And if there's an issue that indeed a crime has occurred, we go out and somebody's home got broken into, but deputies are refusing to take a report, and that's something we really want to address, because we want to take that report and have an investigation conducted to see if we can, catch the people that have done it and return property. And prevent them from doing it again. So I think that if it's about just a report of any situation, we always take information on every situation, and that's memorialized. But in terms of writing a criminal report, it's really important that if it's not being done, that immediately, hopefully, we can better educate the public to call and talk to a supervisor, and better educate our deputies to really explain what's going on, maybe why they can't take a criminal report, because maybe the elements aren't there for the criminal report. But if they are there and we're not taking it, that's something we definitely would need to address.
I think I'm wondering, I hear you, Commissioner Oliver, and a lot of the customers or people out there, they may not feel satisfied. And I wondered if there was a way that you could do a robocall back to the people that did call in or make a report by a third party, and ask them their satisfaction and what they could do to improve. I don't want us to distract too far from what we're focused on this evening, but that you brought up a really good point if there's a way, some ideas, maybe we can address those another time. But Vice Chair Roche.
Just to close the loop on this. So if I at least know when they went to the station to file a report when they were assaulted, would that be enough information for you to figure out who was on staff at the sheriff's station at that time and kind of narrow down who they possibly could have spoken to? Or is that still too broad? Because I don't know about specifics, especially when they're in the middle of, many layers of a situation.
Yes, Commissioner Roche. Yeah, whatever information you can provide me, and I'll look into it to try to figure out what happened. Absolutely.
Commissioner Hallman.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be brief because I'm kind of in agreement to a lot of what Lieutenant Mulder has said, I just want us to be aware. I don't think anyone ever wants to call law enforcement. However, when they do, however great or small their situation is, it's immediate and urgent to them. So I feel that we are asking residents to automatically know, well, I can call and ask for a desk sergeant, or I can call and ask for a watch captain, is something that most people just never comprehend. I believe that it is the responsibility of our deputies to arrive, assess, and then be able to deal with that situation and individual accordingly, as well as give them all of the options that can be presented and let them know how situations like such are handled. So I think more training needs to happen at our sheriff's department. And I think it needs to be continued training, reminder training, because we're all human. We do forget things. But when people call for help, they're asking for help.
Thank you, Commissioner Hallman. Let's try to, it's getting late and we've done a very good job. There's some nice deep discussions and we will continue again at our next meeting. Do we want to address more specifically the staffing? Do you want to go into that further now, you all, or do you want to continue on at our next meeting? Let's get a little bit of feedback about where you guys want to head now with the rest of this meeting. Commissioner Soon-Shiong.
I would suggest we discuss it in our next meeting, and in the interim, there was a suggestion that we receive the Excel spreadsheets that go over these different numbers and also some of the broken down numbers that differentiate between block by block and fire department, and also the actual cost associated with the sheriff's staff and contract.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more comments, input on this, what you guys want to do? Does anybody want to continue now, or are we all good with Commissioner Soon-Shiong's input? Okay, so I take it if anybody wants to say anything different, then raise your hand, or we'll continue on to the next agenda item. Okay, do we have any more public commenters? Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Mulder. Let's move on to the next agenda item, and that will be the Public Safety Commission work plan. Is there anything that we want to discuss on that work plan, or staff, do you want to go ahead?
So Chair, I just have one brief update. Just want to thank Commissioner Oliver and Commissioner Hallman for assisting Margarita Kristanovich with our emergency plan update. They have their first meeting next week. So that is moving forward. So thank you both.
Good job. Thank you guys so much. That's a really heavy lift, and that's thick for you to go through. And what about you, Commissioner Roche and Commissioner Balbone? Do you want to say how you're doing with the project you've been working on?
So we had our first meeting on the 6th, and we had a statement of our purpose that was agreed upon by the group. We also discussed the need to review the option of testing for use by people who are drinking in local establishments. And that was something that we discussed. And this is, I apologize, I jumped right in. This is the joint commission between the Women's Advisory Board and Public Safety tied to, initially we talked about women's safety issues in the city, particularly around nightlife, but we believe it's a problem that is broader than just the women of our community. So we are addressing it as such, knowing that, of course, we have a focus on safety for women, but that based on the statistics that we reviewed here, we also understand that there are men who've also been attacked, raped, and or drugged. And there's both the need to address that for women, but also for men in the city. So that commission is specifically looking at what are the ways that we can actually prevent. And one of the ones that we're actually strongly reviewing and have asked city staff for support on is test strips for drinks. And then around that, we're also wanting to understand, okay, if we start to pass those out and have those available readily in the city, what's the mechanism to work with some of the establishments across the city for accountability when someone does find a positive? So that's specifically some of what we're doing. You know, I will offer our vice chair the floor to see if you have anything to add from our first meeting.
Thank you both. You represent this commission very well. This is we're really making a difference. This is an outstanding commission we have here, and you're making a difference. Do we have any more work plan items that anybody wants to bring up? Do you want to bring up any kind of items that you want to see on our next agenda? Or do you want to continue with what we're doing here? This is a lot of work, and I'm glad we started this early.
So staff, Chair, so staff would recommend on your Public Safety Commission calendar that you decide tonight on the Coalition for Economic Survival, if you want that presentation with the time limit stated in February, or you just want to decline that presentation at this time. I will continue the budget items to the February meeting.
Okay, commissioners, do you want a presentation from the Coalition of Economic Survival? I believe Commissioner Balbone, you are next, unless your hand is still up from previously.
Yeah, it's an unrelated topic.
Okay, Commissioner Oliver.
I would like the CES presentation. I think that the work that they do, you know, to help people, especially, I mean, in many ways, but including housing and keeping people in their homes, is part of the greater picture of public safety. So I think, you know, as we have discussed, making sure that we use, you know, our time as a commission efficiently, but I think hearing from the Coalition for Economic Survival would be beneficial, absolutely, to our work and our commission.
Okay, do we have any more feedback on that? And before we take a vote? Vice Chair Roche.
Commissioner Oliver, do you believe that the report will impact our decisions around our budget for the next meeting, our contracts and our budget? I'm not familiar with the organization. I have no input or attachment. I'm just curious. I don't know if it's something that would be helpful for us for the overall picture of what we do, or if it actually impact our decisions for the budget.
I mean, it is yes and no. You know, I don't know if immediately, but I do think that our, you know, budget discussion is you know, part of that greater reimagining safety, reimagining. So in terms of like, does it have to happen at the February meeting versus the March meeting? You know, if it's a concern of just time, I definitely understand that. I just mean to say that, like, overall, you know, the work that they do, and they're part of West Hollywood, the work they do is in West Hollywood. So especially if we're going to kind of make sure that we stick to our time guidelines, I think it could be very beneficial. Can't say, I mean, I think so.
Staff, can you give us a brief description of what this Coalition of Economic Survival presentation would be about, what they represent?
It's about assisting our residents. So again, West Hollywood has a long history of putting a bunch of services together, kind of a puzzle piece, whether it's public safety, social services, at City Hall, we're all connected and work together to, what's the best outcome for the resident, and CES is part of that. Sorry, my allergies are bothering me, but happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay, so commissioners, we have our budget. We need that in by our March meeting. Is that correct, staff?
We start to turn in information to the city manager by late February. So in the February meeting, again, kind of looking for that general direction from the commission, more or less the same of, the various public safety resources. We start to run out of time if we do it in March. We may miss certain internal deadlines. They're not set yet for us as staff, but they usually come up pretty quickly.
Okay, so this Coalition of Economic Survival group, could they bring that to us later? Would it have an impact on our budget or anything like that, or is it? Go ahead.
No, it will not. It's part of the broader how do we best take care of our residents discussion that I think we all favor, even from the public safety side. They are attending every other board commission meeting. We're one of their last ones to get scheduled.
So that presentation has happened at some of the other boards and commissions already?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, one thing that we could possibly do, commissioners, is get a recording of one of the other commissions and make that available to the public and us, and then just begin with questions. That's another alternative. Let's hear back from you all and make a decision.
I love that idea.
Okay, so we have one. Let's make a motion. We can even just do it by consensus. Would you like the commission, let's say who, by a raise of hands, who wants the presentation, them live, held to 10 minutes? Okay, let's go with that. There's one. Okay, the second one is we have a presentation that's recorded already, and we get that to the commissioners ahead of time and the public on the agenda. Who has a raise of hands for that?
And Chair, just for clarification, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know I'm pretty sure they've been at Planning Commission, so that would be a recording we could watch. I'm wondering if maybe we just start with folks watching that recording, and then you all can weigh the value of bringing the speakers in person. I would hate to schedule them and then have you all say, no presentation, no questions, thanks for coming. And so maybe we start there. I will find the link for you all to watch their presentation to Planning Commission, and then we can weigh whether or not we feel like March is a good time to bring them.
Okay, let's take a vote on that. By a raise of hands, do you like that idea? Okay, I think that we have a majority there. So let's go with that, staff, and get that to us. And those who are watching this publicly, please contact staff as well. We want to get you all of that information as well. And feedback too, if you have something that you want to give feedback to staff that she can get to us.
And if I can find the video quickly and you can watch it quickly, we can try to schedule them for February or let them know it's a no. So I'll do my best to track that down tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds good. Otherwise, commissioners, we've gone in deep here, and hopefully the other commissioners, Commissioner Roman and Shay and whoever can watch this and get up to speed, and we can continue this really important topic in our next meeting. Do we have any more work plan items? Okay, let's move on to the next item. Public Safety Commission calendar and items from staff.
You have a hand raised.
Tori,
Take one
excuse me,
comment.
I requested public comment on the
Sure, yeah,
on item 9B.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. You got 3 minutes.
Okay, so thank you again. So before this meeting started, the two words that stuck out with regards to work plan is neighborhood livability. Over the many years that I've participated in public safety, I have not heard definition either by council or this commission as to what they see as neighborhood livability. With that, given the comments recently during this commission is concerned about having a crisis behavioral health unit, but this commission shows no regard for entities within the city who put certain residents into crisis. This commission talks about the housing shortage crisis, and yet this city does nothing to make sure that scarce, affordable units are actually rented out and occupied. In one building alone, I know of at least 4 units that go empty. Although they're legally rented out, the people haven't lived there for months. There's talk about trust of the sheriff's department. I actually have less trust with this commission because it is a reflection of city council. John Erickson joined in and talked about the importance of residents feeling safe. John Erickson has been made known that a residential building has been used for commercial purposes for over a decade. Disabled people have to wait to access the elevator while commercial employees utilize it for their own personal purposes. This commission, again tonight, has been made aware that certain practical guidelines to stop the spread of COVID are not enacted. At the same time, they'll bend over backwards to keep their businesses open, which I understand, that's where the tax revenue comes from. But all those people who are maskless at the restaurants and bars, they're the ones who are participating in the spread. Meanwhile, basic ventilation doesn't happen in a building where people have compromised immune systems. So it's just so gosh darn funny to listen to commissioners talk about noble virtues while at the same time this city disregards what it should be doing. Code compliance should be evaluating the sites that are under redevelopment. Residents like myself shouldn't have to take it upon themselves on a daily basis to, in some people's term, police what's going on because they're scared that it's going to end up into something more tragic like a fire or somebody getting physically abused.
Thank you, Michael. You always bring some good
It's
comments.
a joke. It's a joke.
And it makes important how many things we need to bring into this commission and discuss, and the importance of being as efficient as we can. Michael, we have like these deadlines for the budget too right now, and you bring some really good points. I mean, you've brought those points up for a long time, and we really need to address those. And I'm not sure how we want to earmark those as well, both of those that he just brought up, and agendize them sometime. But we've got, it's just, we've got so much to handle right now. Commissioner Balbon?
Thank you. I had two items, and one of them I think fits in with some of what Michael was talking about. And I think that one goes under number 2 or goal 2, and that's evaluate, recommend mechanisms to involve the fire department and community services. You know, we just had a fire in New York, and one of the main causes at this point was doors that were not shut to stave off the spread of the smoke. I do think it would be wise to potentially consider, and I know it would not just be fire, but also code and our planning, probably commission, to talk about, okay, so that's something that we need to make sure is done. We've just gone through a major pandemic where ventilation is a real issue. So there might be something to placing something here regarding building safety. And I know this specific item is about fire. That's front of mind for me based on what we saw happen in the Bronx. There is a ventilation question also that's been raised. And I'd like to see us potentially incorporate building safety at least once a year to see if there are new standards and or issues that need to be incorporated into our work plan and or review. And at least just an understanding for this commission if that has been done by planning and if it's being enforced by code. So that's one item. The second item is under number 5. The way that this item reads, when we talk about complaints and issues potentially, it's complaints that are received by the city regarding law enforcement. And one of the things that I call Lieutenant Mulder, and I have every confidence that if someone reaches Lieutenant Mulder, they probably get their questions analyzed. But I don't know that we've seen a reporting mechanisms for the complaints that go directly to the sheriff's department. So if they come here or they come to the city, this item addresses it. I'd like to understand, and we can extend it to block by block and fire. If they receive direct complaints, how does this commission know, okay, we had 5 complaints about dispatch and this is what we did about it. So that's an addition that I'd like to see in number 5, because the way this is worded, it's just if it comes to the city, but not necessarily if it comes to the sheriff. It doesn't seem like we have visibility to that. So those are my 2 adds, potentially the work plan.
Okay. I would like to see this commission make some decisions and come up with some specific things. I mean, as concisely as we can. I'd love for us to run through some of these things that Michael and Commissioner Balbon have said, actionable and recommendations to City Council. It just feels like we can get more done. I think we can. And I think we can be concise about it. Do you want to add those things that Commissioner Balbon just proposed? Does anybody want to speak on those, or do you want to add those onto the work plan? Do you guys want to agendize some of these items in our next meeting? Do we think we can handle it? Commissioner Hallman?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with what Commissioner Balbon just stated, and I don't know if the commission remembers, but a few months ago, I asked what I felt were some very relevant fire questions and fire prevention safety questions in anticipation of moving into fall, winter, using heating, residents using other methods to stay warm. So I'm like, I brought this up. So I think we either said we're going to do it and, make some recommendations that maybe code needs to be amended, the way things are handled need to be amended, but the answer I got, I felt was very generic at the time.
Okay, so could we all agree that we get more specific as this commission and really make some decisions and really shoot for that in our next meeting and thereafter? Let's just rifle through some things and make some specific recommendations. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I think it's going to come in our motions that we make. If we get really clear about what we want to recommend to City Council, what we can recommend, we can recommend policy to them. And if we agendize some items, we could just move through it and just say, okay, let's somebody come up with a clear motion and let's make these recommendations. Do you all agree with that?
Yes, and I would say that I'm ready to make a motion on what I think this building safety could look like. I'd like to see us potentially do an annual review of building safety based on feedback from fire, citizens, current events, and from that adopt changes that would then go into code and reinforcement. Part of that, I think, should also be an annual reminder to people as winter comes about heating safety and fire prevention. So that's a two-parter for me, is there should be an annual review of overall code, how it's going, what's going on, things like addressing ventilation because of the pandemic, making sure interior doors are closed. That's part one. Part two would also be an annual process where we notify residents of just fire safety when winter comes.
And what I would recommend is that you hear from Ben Galan, our building and safety manager, on what they do and how they take fire code updates to City Council every year. And also Danny Rivas, and I know some of you are cringing already as I say this, presentations, but we've got to bring the subject matter experts in for you to hear, okay, this is what the city already does, and then you can make recommendations on what additionally you think the city needs to do. I would not recommend putting them on next month while you are discussing the budget. I think that's too topic heavy, but I could see if they're available for the March meeting, if that works for all of you.
Kristen, I think that would be great. And one thing that I am very interested in is specifically ventilation and what they're looking at based on what we've seen with COVID. So if we can ask them come to the meeting prepared to discuss any changes or updates with that in mind.
Oh, okay, do we, Commissioner Hallman, does that sort of fit what you've been asking for as well? Do you think that will encompass it?
Somewhat. I would just like also a strong emphasis to be placed on residential fire safety, because that seems to be where we typically see unfortunate incidents happen.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Balbone. Let's go with that one first. Does anybody want to second that motion so we can vote on that, to agendize that?
It sounds like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like what we want to do is potentially get those folks here in March and then round out what we've recommended, noting that, okay, annual at least education, and then, an annual report and review, excuse me, by this commission. But it would be good if we could round it out even further, potentially after hearing from them. I'm open to that.
Okay, and Michael, we hope that you come, but let's we have a motion and we have a second. Let's do a roll call.
Actually, did I hear Commissioner Balbone right? Like, we'll hold on the motion for now, get the subject matter experts here, and then you all can discuss, like, making an official motion. You don't have to make a motion to have me bring the speakers to you. As long as it's the consensus of the council that everybody, the majority is okay, that's what we fill our March meeting with. that's enough for us to get started on the staff side for you.
That
Unless
sounds
I'm
good to me.
misunderstanding.
That sounds good. And do we all agree? Anybody? Okay, let's focus on exactly what we want to accomplish and some decisions we want to make and recommendations. Maybe prepare everybody to try to come up with some a motion so that we can get something done here and it's just not vague anymore. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about work plan and additions? Michael, I hope that you come and prepared with all of your questions and even get them to us early before that March meeting. And so that we can think through those and also know that you can submit documentation, Michael. Now that's part of this commission and it will go into the public record too. So, and that will help us. And thank you, Michael, for your suggestions and everybody here. Okay, let's move on to public comments. Okay, no public comments. Items from commissioners? No. Okay, thank you all. This was a great meeting. We got a little bit deep. We'll hopefully continue, and we'll really accomplish some things here. So everybody, you're very important. This is a very, very important commission. You're a great group. It's the best group I've ever seen here, and you're really going to make a change. I believe it. Okay, let's adjourn.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.